At the eWorld Purchasing and Supply Conference in September 2012, Hubwoo have been delighted to welcome Barry Hooper, the CPO of Nationwide, to speak on our behalf concerning Nationwide's procurement transformation project. Hubwoo are very proud to be providing the enabling technology to support Nationwide's procurement transformation program and the introduction of open, intelligent processes within Nationwide. Thank you.
We've been working with Hubwoo for about 2 years. I'm not here to sell the Hubwoo solution to you. What I do want to do is take you through the journey that we had within Nationwide and where we've got to where we are as a business. A bit about me. I'm probably a little bit unique in terms of procurement people. Whilst I started off in procurement some 20 odd years ago, I've had the benefit of actually doing a number of different roles across different businesses and different sectors. Head of marketing, I've run an ATM business unit, I've run operations for Citibank in the UK. I've also worked in the automotive sector and telecoms. So my view of procurement and the role that procurement plays in business is very different from someone that's just come through a general procurement route. And my philosophy is very clear and very simple. It's about demystifying the procurement process and making it easier for the business areas to actually engage with procurement and actually procure goods and services. So, what am I going to take you through? I'm going to take you through our journey and give you a bit of insight in terms of the approach that we've taken. This isn't going to be death by PowerPoint and lots of bullet points, and what I want to try and do is make this quite intuitive for you. But I'll take you through the operating model and how we define that, understanding our vision and how we set out our stall for the business, and how we drove the case for change, and then how we implemented change across the business. What I will say is that actually it's this week that we've gone live with our e-buying solution provided by Hubwoo. It is the final module of a transformation program that we've delivered, and again I'll take you through some of those parts. What I do want to share with you in the spirit of best practice is looking at some of the benefits that we've derived, but also some of the key learning points that can be taken from that. So, going straight into the thick of it. The key challenge for us was, how do you start to articulate procurement to the business? You know, we've all heard of the 7-step methodology or the 5-step methodology, but to be honest, if you engage with the business with that type of approach, it just turns them off. So our approach was quite simple to say, actually, our approach is 3 steps, and it links directly to the Institute of Directors' responsibilities. So, from a financial services perspective, we need to understand what are the business requirements, and senior individuals in the business are accountable for defining the business requirements and getting the strategy signed off. How we buy, i.e. the process that we go through, for us is very simplistically 1 step. Now within Nationwide, the how we buy process is actually delegated to procurement as a function to manage that on behalf of the business. Some organisations have different models. The final step in the process is how we manage. So the life cycle relationship is, what is the business strategy? How do we buy the goods and services, and then how do we manage them through to exit and sort of business continuity? Now, obviously, through that process, there are a number of stakeholders that we need to engage with, and for us, we've just summarised the ones at the bottom. Again, every organisation is different in terms of different stakeholders that you may need to engage in different parts of the process. But for me, the key thing is what systems and tools and processes sit underneath that. So, we started off in a pub with a paper napkin as a leadership team and said, right, what is the challenge that we face? And we drew this picture on the left-hand side, which identified the current processes that we had. Nationwide as a business has acquired other businesses over the last few years, and as a result, we've inherited legacy systems, legacy applications, and whilst we haven't integrated them all, we've ended up with this sort of hybrid model. And what became fairly clear to us was that the way that we engage the business, the way that we educate the business to buy goods and services was very complex and very difficult, because of the processes that existed. Most of the training that existed was around word of mouth. You know, there was no handbooks for some of this stuff, and we were expecting the business just to navigate through processes that weren't very easy. So our vision was to try and create a gateway in the first instance, because we knew that changing the wholesale back office of the business would be quite complicated. You know, we had the usual conversations with consultants around, well, what can you provide and what would this transformation journey look like? And generally, the consistent message we got back was that this was double-digit millions in terms of transformation end-to-end. It would probably take about 2 years, and we probably haven't got the capability within the business to do it. So that was our starting point. And a bit of soul-searching later, we then got a bit more scientific with our approach and said, well, actually, what are the issues that sit behind the back of the system? So we had separate buying teams that weren't really talking together. The procurement process wasn't unified. We had back-end processes within our accounts payable function that didn't link directly into procurement. We didn't have the ability to map contract spend directly with payments. Finance was sitting quite independent. We had an Oracle-based solution that we weren't properly utilising across the business. We hadn't upgraded Oracle Financial, therefore there's a big step change required to move to the Oracle purchasing platform. So the debate that we had was, well, actually as a business, we've got a Sept banking platform, we have an Oracle financial platform that needs upgrading. What do we do as a procurement function? Which system do we go with? Do we hedge our bets one way or the other way? What's the business strategy for the applications? And we started to look at, well, what are the things that sit behind some of these things? And most of these won't be new to you. You'll be familiar to most of these points. But for us, it's about how do we then distill that down and how do we start to form a business case around the issues that we have. To do that, we thought, well, actually, we've got the processes, we've also got the business education piece. So we need to start educating the business in a slightly different way. So we've got the back-end processes, but we've also got the suppliers that we currently interact with. And how can we start to build a narrative within the business that explains how we're trying to manage the supply base? So we came up with this chart, fairly simplistic, and we started syndicating it around the business. Because for us, this articulated the challenge that we faced. Requirements were coming in at the top end. Some were consolidated, some were fairly fragmented. Obviously, the role of procurement is trying to aggregate those requirements where possible and drive better commercial value. We drive the better commercial value by liaising with and working with partners. And we try to take the buying experience and distill it down, because the reality is, the constant challenge I've certainly faced is that everyone in the business is a buyer. Everyone thinks they can do a buying job. What people don't appreciate is the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So we use the analogy of actually this model. You know, we've all been there on a Saturday morning when you wake up and you've got guests, or you realise you've got no milk. You quickly go through the buying process and think, well, actually, I'll just stick on my jacket and I'll run down the corner shop. You know, we instinctively use those sort of experiences where we do tactical transactions all the time. Equally, you might get to a point where you've got friends staying at the weekend and actually it's not milk you need, it's bread and it's other things. You go to the high street. You know, at the corner shop piece, you don't think about car parking, it's stick on my trainers and run down the shop. The high street, well, you might think, well, I need 50p for the parking meter, it's going to take me a little bit longer. Equally, with the retail park, you go through the process and think, well, I need to go to Boots, I might need to go to Mothercare. There's a retail park, it's free car parking. Actually, it's probably a queue to get in, so I might need to allow an hour. So you go through a controlled process of identifying the risks and steps you need to go through. And equally, the strategic type suppliers that we've got, the superstores. You know, for those of us that are quite organised or have organised other halves, you have a list on the fridge and you populate at the end of the month, you take it to the shop. Again, the buying experience that you go through is very different. And in procurement, what we're about is applying that methodology in a corporate sense. So we have our big strategic suppliers, which are the superstores, and then we have the tactical suppliers. As a procurement function, I'm not really that bothered about the tactical side, because that's low level, low value. What I'm interested in doing is providing infrastructure for that. So when we started to then map the suppliers against that, we started to identify that actually the issues that we had was the administrative burden at the bottom end, low value transactions. And what we needed to do was drive more leverage and supply management around the top end. So when we looked at spend, 80% of our spend was actually at the top end. You know, we've done a lot of work as a business to take the supply numbers down. So we've gone in 2 years from 15,000 on a payment file down to 1,900 suppliers. And a large proportion of our spend is actually in that top end. When you then look at the administration process, 80% of our admin was against 20% of our expenditure. But again, it started to drive a narrative with the business that made it very clear what we were about. And for us, that worked really well. So we then started on the back of that to say, right, in terms of managing the operations piece of procurement, in terms of managing the finance process and managing the supply base, what are the key things we need to look at and how do we need to drive change? And for me, having worked in organisations before, the key was actually not to take a solution that's off the shelf and then tailor it to our processes. It was about taking something off the shelf and not tailoring it to our business requirements, but changing the processes. Now, for Nationwide, that was quite a challenge, because more often than not, we actually changed the systems to meet our requirements rather than the other way around. So we said it has to be an off-the-shelf solution. Now, the reality is we have only made 2 tweaks to the Hubwoo solution. Everything else is off the shelf, and our processes have changed. Now, that was quite a hard call to make on the basis that you are driving more change across the business during the implementation phase than the business may be prepared to accept. We wanted lower total cost of ownership in terms of the systems and the infrastructure. We wanted to challenge the internal processes to not only reduce bureaucracy and cost, but also to drive greater efficiency. And more importantly, we needed it to ensure that we meet not only our business control requirements, but also the regulatory requirements as well. So, how do we go about that? Well, we mapped the current as-is processes for everything that existed. Two reasons for doing that. One was to identify exactly how we operate currently and how the systems work, so that when we migrate to a new solution, we can actually cross off every process to know that it's been effectively mapped, but also to end up with a new process guide, which means that we can go for IS certification at the end of the year. We undertook a market assessment. We did go out to a large number of providers, and we did choose Hubwoo. Now, for us, obviously, every organisation will go through the same sort of process, and you'll look at cultural fit, the system's integrity, how it interfaces with what you've got. But for us, the Hubwoo partnership with Sept, given our banking relationship with Sept, was quite a nice fit. We then went through quite a strong business integration program. So the Hubwoo solution, again, I think it's probably fair to say it's a fairly generic model in terms of procurement process. But for us, what was great was that the Hubwoo solution started to join the dots of the fragmented processes that we had across the business. So, our vision was to come up with an integrated program that covers not what we buy, because that really is about our sourcing strategy and how we engage with the business. What we wanted to do was look at how we buy. So the iSource application, or eSource as it's called within the Hubwoo world, is the actual back office procurement platform. So we've now integrated that within Nationwide, and as a procurement team, we have a consistent way of operating across not only procurement, but also the engagement with legal, the engagement with finance. So the whole contract authoring process has now been completely automated. iBuy, again, you'll see the pattern here. eBuy in Hubwoo world is the actual buying interface, so the transaction element of requisition to pay that exists across the business. So for us, the buying process was two parts, the procurement element and then the business-facing element. And then in terms of how we manage, we've actually implemented a program with a company called Dataflux, who's providing a supplier governance tool for us. Now, the key thing, obviously, by putting the systems in place is that what we need to do is to use the information that's in the systems in a way that actually educates and informs our buying decisions and how we operate with the business. So prior to engaging on the program, we actually engaged with another company who did some data mining for us. So we took 2 years' worth of historical spend and we put it through several cleansing exercises where now I'm able to not only use the data that we get from the system, but also use 2 years' worth of historical spend based on UNSPSC coding to profile what we spend on consultancy, what we spend on IT, what we spend on hotels. And what we've been able to do is to sense check what's in the current system, because the Oracle system that we had gave the business the ability to change between nominals and GLs. So again, we're able to go back to the business with a different data set and really challenge the understanding of what was in the business. And what we've done through this process is to not implement a solution independent of the other business functions, but to engage them in what we're doing. So we've worked with legal on the contracts authoring piece, the creation of the central contracts database, how we make the contracts available to the business to ensure that suppliers are meeting the requirements. We've engaged with the accounts payable team in terms of how we manage the payments elements, how we set up the payment profiles within the system. So whilst procurement have driven this, we've done it in conjunction with the other business areas, and we've taken them on that journey by building their requirements in upfront, as opposed to taking a procurement solution and just force-fitting it on the business areas. And for us, that level of interaction has been really powerful because we've taken them on that journey and both functions have started to gain from the benefits. So what we've now ended up with is a completely integrated solution based on one set of MI, one core set of data, and one source of the truth. And as I say, we're only in the first week of this yet, but we're already starting to see some of the benefits that are coming out of that. What we were able to do was then go back to our original design and say, well, what are the key issues that we had within the process? And we're able to go back and validate and say, has the solution covered off our requirements? And clearly, as you'll appreciate, our requirements are a lot more than what's on this list. But these were the key things for us that we were able to go out to the business and educate them to say, these were the issues that we face as a function, but as a business, and this is what we've done to address them. So what does our big picture look like now? So our program, when we started, consisted of 4 modules. The iSource, iBuy, iManage, and iAnalyze. But what we've been able to do through the work that we've done is to actually extend the procurement remit to actually include expenses and travel. So we've launched this week a new expenses module where we're integrating expenses to give us the level of detail that we need so that we can start migrating spend from the expenses solutions into the procurement process and leveraging the spend more appropriately. We're in the process of rolling out corporate credit cards, which we've never had as a business. And as a result of rolling out credit cards, it gives us the ability to change how we manage travel across the business. So hopefully what you can see is that the approach that we've now got, so you sort of come into procurement, we use the procurement platform that we have to identify whether you go through a low-end transactional route with tactical suppliers, or whether you go through the procurement process, and then which suppliers we then use. So we're able to get involved up front and start directing the spend to the relevant suppliers. We use the iManage tool to drive supplier performance. And again, we've really probably only just started in earnest on this in the last 6 months. There's certainly a lot more work we need to do in the iManage space. But again, what we're trying to do is to integrate the applications so they all sing from the same data set. And then obviously analyze. Now, the savings that we're delivering through this are quite huge. It's in the hundreds of millions category. And what we've been able to do is to not only put the system in place, but drive out the benefits through the operational efficiencies, decommissioning legacy systems, reducing headcount internally. What we're able to do is to use the solution to actually drive incremental change and benefits through the development of our sourcing strategies. And it's the culmination of the benefit in those sourcing strategies that we're using to sell out to the business. Aberdeen research suggests that anything between 5 and 20% cost savings can be delivered as a result of bringing spend under management within procurement. We are probably at the moment around about the 12-13% run rate benefit in terms of spend that we influence, which, given when we started on this journey, was probably in the region of about 3-4%, is clearly a major milestone step forward. Key to this, what we found is that actually engaging with the business is really important. So very early on, we identified the key individuals across the business that were our requisitioners. We understood what their issues were with the systems that existed. We knew what they were, to be honest. But again, this was about taking them on a journey and engaging them in the process. And what became fairly clear was that the way that we communicate within the business, the way that we drive change, needs to be very different. So we use Microsoft's SharePoint solution, and we've used that to actually create an environment where individuals can go in. The users can talk collaboratively to each other. If they have an issue as part of the old legacy systems, they're able to communicate. But as we started to roll out new systems, it became important that they had a shared community where they could share ideas around how do the systems work, how do you get around this issue, what is the problem. But as a result of the dialogue that existed across the business, we were able to take that information and use it to inform and change the user guides that we've rolled out. We've also rolled out across the business Captivate training. So this is where you can log onto a screen and the mouse will move and it will direct you against the actions and what you need to do. So for each module of the solution, we've got training that supports that. And what we've found from the stakeholders and the champions across the business is that this has been fundamental in terms of helping and easing the implementation into the business. I'm not going to say we got it perfect. You know, there were things that we started to do through this process that clearly weren't working for us. But because we had the feedback, we had the knowledge and the information to be able to do something about it. And this is just a few comments that we've had from some of the people this week. So again, what we've been getting the stakeholders across the business to do is to post their comments on the site. And we've been using that to obviously then inform the different areas of the business where we are with it. But what for me is really pleasing is that, you know, the objectives that we had about making the solution simple, making it very easy for the business, have held true because they've started to come through in the commentary that we've got from the business. One of my team did point out to me and said, yes, but, you know, some people could argue it's still quite complicated because what we had before was even more complicated. But I'm happy with the solution that we've put in place and the engagement we've got with the business, that I think the solution we have got is the right one for our business. And it's quite interesting, as a sort of head of procurement rolling out a new system across the business, you know, that 2 weeks before, you sort of get that nervousness around, well, what if this doesn't land right? What if the accounting process doesn't work? What if the purchase orders don't match up with the accounting process at the back end? You know, and we went through that pain. But we put so many controls and so much testing in place, and we used the people in the current teams to do that rather than external consultants. And the benefit for that was that what we didn't have was a solution that was forced upon us. What we had was people within our own business units and within my own team that took the original design concept, that understood what it meant for us as a business, and then worked that through, undertook all of the testing, went through the launch process, and are now in a position where they completely understand the whole back-end process, how it hangs together, how all the interfaces work. So I now have a team of 55 people across the procurement team that can talk on an informed basis when we get queries that come in from across the business. And having that power and the resource at your fingertips for us has been amazing. You know, I've been in environments where we've had solutions forced upon us before, you know, or finance dictate that this is the central financing platform that we're going to use, and therefore you take the procurement module of that, and you deal with the implications of rolling that out across the business. This is the first time in my career that we've ever rolled out a solution that we've done it seamlessly, and we've done it in a way that the whole business has gone on that journey. So some of the benefits. We've now automated the procure-to-pay process. We do have and can measure the turnaround of requisition to purchase order. And whilst we are in early days of that, we definitely know that it's starting to drive benefits. We have had some user experience issues where people are getting to grips with the system. But those that have been trained and those that are using it day in, day out and have been using it this week, we've started to see a big improvement in the turnaround times of not only going into the system, finding the items that you want, creating the shopping cart, but actually just processing that through. We've created online catalogues. Now, you talk to most organisations, and the benchmarking that I undertook was that roughly about 40% of the spend can be catalogued. The challenge I set my team with Hubwoo was that actually I want more like 60% catalogued. And we are on target for having roughly 60% of our spend catalogued within the next month. Part of the challenge that we've had with the creation of the catalogues is actually the suppliers and getting the suppliers on board to create the information to go into the catalogues. And again, because we're pushing the boundaries of trying to drive more spend through catalogues, we've started to engage with organisations that haven't previously created catalogues. We've created a new category structure. So again, the old category structure that we had was very nationwide specific. And again, we've moved away from that. We've started to use industry standards. So the ability to benchmark, to look at spend, gives us, you know, a different level of detail. We've gone through the process of working with finance and reviewing all of the nominal and GL codes that exist across the business, and we've mapped them directly against suppliers. So again, we get that visibility of spend and the correct coding up front. The interaction with other business areas has been automated. I mentioned the case with legal. And we've also found that we've created an environment now where we can actually evolve the procurement model. So if we decide to delegate or to pass out some of the procurement responsibility in the business areas, we have a way of doing that and a centralised tool that will enable us to manage that. And also our benefits pipeline is increased. So in terms of key learning points, ensure that your processes are documented before you begin. Because if you do have an issue with it, going back to the original processes is really important. And we did have issues and challenges, and the benefit of being able to understand the process, how it works, how the systems interact with each other was instrumental. Be resolute, hold firm to the software as a service, and this is an off-the-shelf solution. It's very easy to be tempted and swayed to make minor amendments and tweaks as you go along. And when we started on the journey, I think, whilst we said we don't want no business changes, the feedback we got from the business was we probably needed about 200. And by challenging and questioning that 200, we managed to get it down to 2. Understand the business processes. So for us, this was about working with the business areas, understanding how they operate, what challenges have they got, and how we can address those challenges through the implementation of the system. For us, implementing software as a service has been a challenge. This was the first project in Nationwide where we've implemented software as a service. Historically, most of our transformation programs have been based on the plan, build, and run methodology. Our resources have been aligned to that model. So currently taking software as a service where you don't follow that methodology has created some challenges for us. Not only as a procurement function, but also for a transformation and IT delivery team. So for procurement to deliver the first software as a service solution was a bit of a milestone for us within Nationwide. Mapping SAP and Oracle solutions can be done. I think we've proved that we can do that with the solution that we currently have. And we had lots of debate with people in the business previously around for those that were Oracle-centric, for those that were SAP-centric, that you just couldn't do this. It was either one or the other. The reality is you can do it. It is technical. You do need staging platforms that integrate between the two systems, but it can be done. Engaging the procurement team up front is the key to success. So before we even launched this as a program, we had an internal procurement launch event to get the procurement team motivated and engaged. And we used a whole sort of a comms pack around that of creating a buying experience of Hub from Woo, this guy from space being the person who needs to procure a rocket. And we've taken people on a nice sort of easy, informed journey to explain the processes before we deploy them across the business. Understanding the BAU resources has driven greater ownership. So again, mapping the processes, who owns them? Do you have end-to-end accountability for the process was key. Constant business engagement and communication. data and information. You know, throughout the program, what we found is that actually by having the data and the MI in place, we've been able to go back and challenge the business. And if we hadn't got the robustness of the data and we hadn't got the data to challenge, some of our arguments would have been very difficult to implement. Be clear on what success looks like, and ultimately, stand firm and hold your nerve. I will be on the Hubwoo stand, as it says, from 11 till 12 if anyone's got any questions. What I would like to say is that from my perspective, I'm quite passionate about building a capability within the procurement industry. And I think for a long time we've been operating in sort of silos and rely on our own personal networks to share information. Whilst there is some sensitivity around some of the stuff that we've delivered and some of the savings, the numbers, the actual process and the methodology of what we've got, I'm happy to share with people. So if anyone's interested, would like some more details on that, please come see me at the Hubwoo stand, or I think we've got contact details there for you. I hope you found that useful. And so I didn't want to sell the solution to you, and for me it was just an opportunity to take you through sort of the process that we've gone through. What I do recognise is that having worked in different industries and different sectors, the procurement process and how you implement it isn't a one-size-fits-all model. You know, and I've worked in different organisations where they've taken different approaches. For us, this has worked. I'm not saying it'll work for you, but hopefully you've got some insight in terms of how we've done it as a business. Okay.